So in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you a little bit more of my own process and experience on this healing journey. And it comes as a result of a conversation I recently had with somebody that actually shocked me. So if you're new to this channel, welcome. I'm Peggy Oliveira. Thanks so much for joining me. Make sure you subscribe and click the little bell for notifications. So in this conversation, we were talking about how it's just impossible to heal from interpersonal or childhood trauma on your own for anybody. And she said, well, you did. And I was literally kind of shocked because I know that she knows that that isn't the reality, because I know that she's heard me talk about it before. I talk about it quite often. Part of the reason that I am so adamant about the importance of working with somebody that really knows what they're doing isn't just because I'm a therapist. It's because I know the value of it from a personal point of view. So after I got over the initial shock, I said, no, I didn't. I didn't do it on my own, not even close to doing it on my own. And so it got me thinking about wanting to do this video because I know, and I've heard this from many of you actually, that while you know that I have the same kind of history, that I have struggled in a lot of the same ways, that it's easy to forget that. Like when you watch a video and I have no problem talking about different things, or maybe I seem really confident on video and I can make a mistake and laugh about it or something like that, that it can be hard to really pull those things together, that I am the person that you see doing this video and that I am the person that struggled and felt and experienced so many of the same things that you do. But I am that same person. I'm still the same person who struggled in all those ways. Because again, healing isn't about changing who you are. It's about coming back home to the truth of who you are. So I wanted to do this video to share with you a little bit about the reality of the fact that I have not done this on my own, and the fact that it's not easy to find people to work with. So you know that the healing process for me started when I started my therapy after that 911 call. But in all reality, I don't remember, since it's been so long, I kind of forget a little bit of the timeline, but probably a handful of years or so before that, when I was in a process of making a lot of really big life-changing decisions that were potentially incredibly self-sabotaging, I decided to seek out a therapist because I thought for sure that what I was doing was not good for me. It was the wrong decision, and I wanted somebody to tell me what to do. So I went, and unfortunately, I think I only went like a couple of times because I decided that I was going to move away. So I lived in North Carolina at the time, and I was going to move back home to my hometown in Illinois. And I told her that I was going to be leaving, and what we were talking about for that session or two, the reason I went to see her is I really just wanted somebody to help me know what the right decision was. So we weren't talking about my past really or anything like that. And given that it was only maybe 2 sessions, we weren't really talking about much of anything. But she ended up giving me a referral for somebody in my hometown. But unfortunately, and at that time, there weren't therapy directories and stuff like that, because this was in this would have been 89 or 90. So the place that she found, the name was familiar to me. She said, here's a place that you can go. She handed me this information. And I saw the name and I just thought, oh my God, I am not going there. She must think that I'm really crazy, because I knew that name because I walked by that place most days because it was by my school, the school that I had gone to. And it was the mental health center in the community. And it was, what I knew of it, it was an inpatient, like, mental hospital. That's what I knew of it. And I thought, oh my God, she wants me to go to a mental hospital. And I don't remember particularly having a thought like I was going to be inpatient. In fact, I don't think that I thought that. But just the idea that I would go to the same place, it reinforced, oh my God, I'm crazy. I'm really beyond help. I need more help than anybody could really give me. I don't want to end up in the hospital. So needless to say, I moved away and I didn't go. So fast forward however many years, few years or so, and that's when the 911 call happened. So you know that I then started at the Rape Crisis Center. And what you may not know is that the person that I saw, it was a fairly brief period of time, but my counselor was actually not a trained therapist. She was not licensed. She did not even have a bachelor's degree, I'm almost positive, in anything related to social work or psychology or anything. So I saw her for that period of time. And while she didn't have any of the degrees or the certification, she did have a lot of experience working in that center. She worked in the domestic violence part and she worked in the sexual assault part for quite a while before I ever went there. And while I ended up leaving that experience from miscommunication, the time that I had with her was incredibly profound. And I am so grateful for that time that she was the person that I started with. Now, could she have gotten me where I needed to be if I had never left Illinois and I stayed there the whole time? Honestly, probably not. Because she didn't have the advanced education and clinical training and all of that. But for what it was at the time, I am so grateful that that's who I was connected with. Because of her experience, and she had experience, personal experience as well with some different things. But because of all of her experience, for the first time, I shared things with somebody who knew what to say. And not just from a script, but felt it. She didn't judge me. She asked questions, but wasn't too probing. She was encouraging. She was not shaming at all. She listened and she understood. And of course, she suggested that I do the group. And I'm so grateful for that experience. And she was one of the facilitators in the group. There were two. And the other person also was not a licensed or trained therapist or anything like that. And at the time, I don't think they actually had any licensed therapists at that particular time. So I ended that because of a miscommunication. And I thought, okay, well, I'm done, right? So fast forward a few years, I don't remember exactly how long, but I don't know, 3 years, maybe 5 years. And I believe, just started my graduate program. And I decided, and so my graduate program was in social work. My undergraduate was in social work and sociology, and I minored in psychology. So I had this thought that, okay, I am going to be doing social work. I didn't know what that was going to look like exactly, but I thought, okay, I'm going to be working with a lot of people that have a lot of different issues. I need to make sure I've got my shit together. I need to make sure that I know what my stuff is and that I've worked through it. So I decided to go back to therapy. And because of how my time at the Center for Prevention of Abuse, the Rape Crisis Center, because of how that ended in the miscommunication, I really felt like I couldn't go back there. Like my time there was done because the services there were free and it was time for me to move on. So I found somebody else. I think it was a bit challenging. I don't remember how challenging it was, but trying to figure out who to go to is never easy. So I did find somebody, and their focus was on trauma, I believe. Maybe childhood trauma in particular. I don't remember exactly. And I don't remember much of the experience, and I don't remember how long I saw her. It wasn't for a very long time, maybe 6 months or so, but there was benefit in it. I shared some things with her. I don't know that I shared anything new with her that I hadn't previously shared, but there was some valuable work that happened in that. And then I think I may have stopped seeing her because during that time, I got in a car accident, and I had a lot of doctor's appointments and stuff like that. So I think it just became kind of challenging to make the time for it, or at least that's the excuse I gave. So I stopped going. But part of the thing that was coming up for me, I think maybe that even made me decide to see her, was we were about to buy our first house. And this was a house that never could I have imagined that I would ever be able to live in, let alone buy. Now, I want to be clear, this was just an average middle-class home. 4-bed, 2.5 bath. It was a new construction home, but still it was just there was a lot of new construction in the area at the time. Just an average middle-class home. But growing up in poverty with, living on welfare and not having food in the fridge and not having a car much of the time and all that kind of stuff, I never thought I would even own my own home, let alone a 4-bed, 2.5 bath. So I found myself a little anxious and having some fears come up. And I remember having the thought, what if we get this house and I'm still not happy? Because we often think, well, when this happens, or if I can just do this, then everything will be okay, or then I'll be happy, or then I'll feel a sense of peace, whatever it is that we say to ourselves. And I had been saying that to myself, I think, for a little while. Well, if we could just find a home and know that the kids have a great space and they're close enough to school, then I'll be happy. And I started recognizing, okay, wait a minute, I don't think this house is going to make me happy. So that's why I went to her, or part of why I decided that I needed to go. So I stopped seeing her and kind of went on. And then I didn't go back again until, again, about a handful of years or so later. And I don't remember the timing exactly, so please excuse this, because it was a long time ago. But I remember I've seen probably, I don't know, over the years, maybe 8 different therapists or so. Might be a couple of them that I only saw like once or twice, and then a few of them that I saw for a little period of time. But I ended up in 2007, which is when I started my practice. It brought up a lot for me because it touched into fear around not being good enough, being unworthy. Like the idea of having my own business was never something I would have ever considered. So there were a lot of things coming up for me, and I decided to seek therapy again. And I had been looking for somebody but really couldn't find anybody. And then my son ended up having what turned out to be his first seizure. And I was terrified, overwhelmed. That was about 7 months after I started my practice. And I just thought, okay, I need to find somebody. So like most people, I got online, but at that time, I don't remember. Oh yes, there were directories because I was in one. So anyway, I found this woman, and she talked about journaling as an important part of the process. And I thought, oh, kindred spirits. So I decided, because while I encourage people to journal, I don't always do it myself as well as I'd like to. So I decided to see her, and she was very different. What you would call kind of like woo-woo, which was a little unusual for me to be drawn to something like that, but it was an incredibly interesting experience and also beneficial. So I worked with her for probably, again, I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe a little more than that. And I found benefit in that. And then for whatever reason, I stopped working with her. And I ended up seeing, for whatever reason, I sought out somebody again. That person, I saw, she was older. I kind of liked her, but then when I went to leave, I think I went to shake her hand, and she said, "Oh no, I don't do handshakes, I do hugs." And I let her hug me. So even at that time, so that would have been, I don't know, 2008 or so. So I'd already had my own practice. I didn't set that boundary because while I don't mind hugs, I felt like it was completely inappropriate for her to say that, like on a professional level. It was unprofessional for her to do that as a trauma therapist. But I let her hug me. And I think I did go back to her maybe another time or two. But it just, after that, I just found lots of reasons why she was not the person I wanted to see. So I searched for somebody else. Again, not easy to do that, right? Found somebody else that I thought could work. She might have even been referred from somebody. I don't remember exactly. Her office was in her home. And that was kind of intriguing to me because I had thought about having my practice in my home. So I was kind of curious. And my first session didn't start off well because she was late getting our session started because she ran over with the other person. Might have been late starting with that person too. And because it was in her home, I had to do it outside, which was a little weird because people probably knew, her neighbors probably knew that she had a practice in her home. And then you're waiting outside, just hanging out, and then some guy comes out and you go in, and it just felt a little odd. But then her space was covered in, I think she had a cat. Her space was completely covered in cat hair, and the cat was kind of disruptive. And again, just felt kind of unprofessional to me. So I moved on from there. And I do have very high expectations. I'm not perfect. I am not at all suggesting that I am perfect, that my space is perfect, that nobody ever feels like I'm not professional or my space isn't right or anything like that. But that was what I felt, and that was reason enough for me to move on. So I think I did end up seeing somebody else, but I'm guessing that must have only been one time too, because I really don't remember for sure, but I feel like there was somebody else. So that was the end of my therapy experience then. So then we moved to Arizona, and I don't really remember exactly why I sought somebody out initially. But there was somebody that I met with that I felt like maybe there was a little bit more work for me to do on my trauma. And so she was supposed to be a trauma expert as well. So I went to see her, and she was late coming out to get me. And this is not a judgment for anybody listening to this who happens to be late. Please know that it is not judgment. But I am somebody who, that is like one of the top things for me. I don't like to be late to things. I don't like to keep people waiting. And as a professional, I find it completely unprofessional and kind of rude to the people that are waiting on you. That's just my opinion. So she was late to the first session, and while I was a little annoyed, I didn't know what was going on. Somebody did come out, I think. But I tried not to let it bother me too much. I ended up working with her for a little while, but I'm not exaggerating here. When I say literally, I mean it in the correct context. Every session, and I saw her, I believe, weekly for probably a minimum of 3 months, maybe even up to like 6 months or so, I don't remember. Literally every session, she was late, sometimes 5 minutes, up to about 20 minutes. Yet I kept seeing her. So the reason I'm sharing that with you is because there were things I liked about her. There's obviously something that I didn't like about her and that felt really disrespectful to me. But I continued to work with her because honoring ourselves, especially in that kind of a vulnerable place, isn't easy to do. And I've tried other therapists before, and it's hard to find somebody, so I rationalized it. Going back to my previous video, I rationalized it that, well, she's good in these ways, so maybe just, kind of ignore this. And I finally, maybe it was another time that it was 20 minutes late, and she never acknowledged it. I won't say literally never. There might have been once or twice when she said, "Oh, sorry for running late," or something like that, but that was like it. And then of course she was late again the next time. The last time I saw her, I think it was one of the times that she was like 20 minutes late, and most of the time she never even acknowledged it. And so that was it for me. For whatever reason, I was able to get to that point, and I said, I'm done. So I think I did try to find somebody else after that, and I just really wasn't successful, so I stopped. And I did get some value in my time with her. Was it worth it, given all the annoyance and everything? It's hard to say because sometimes you don't really know the full value of what you're getting. But I know that it made me struggle with feeling like, why am I putting up with this, and feeling all that frustration. So then again, fast forward. So I've shared a little bit of this in pieces at different points. So the last time I saw somebody was, I believe I started working with her in 2013, towards the end of 2013. And I want to share with you a little bit about what made me see her in the first place, because again, I want to share with you, even as a therapist, not all that long ago, well, I guess at this point it's been like 8 years or so, but that even having at that point, I don't know, like 13, 14 years experience, that there are still things that come up that we need support around at times, no matter who you are. So in 2011, I moved into a new office space, or I was looking for a new office space, and I had a colleague that we were in a consultation group together, and we talked about getting a space together. And I was a little hesitant because I am very particular, and I like things to be a particular way. Some people might say I have control issues. I don't need to control other people, but the space that I'm creating for myself, the space that I create for my clients, I have very specific ideas about it. It needs to feel a certain way, and I'm very particular about it. So if somebody wants to call me controlling about that, I'm fine with that. So anyway, I let her know. I said, I love the idea of sharing a space together, but I really have a very clear vision of what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, what it's going to smell like, because I used a particular fragrance in my space. What the music in the waiting room is going to be. And she said, "Oh yeah, that's all fine. There was a time that I would have cared about all of that, but I don't really care about any of that anymore. I've been doing this too long," or something along that line. And she was older than me. I don't think she was technically more experienced than me, but she was older than I was, so I had more life experience at least. So I was like, okay, if you're sure, then yes, let's move forward. So we found this beautiful space that we had them do some work to, take some walls down and paint and all that. And from before we technically even opened the office, the problems started because, and this is kind of a red flag, when you're looking for a therapist as well, if they don't want to share this with you, or if the answer is no. Not always, it doesn't have to be, but it's just something to keep in the back of your mind. I knew she had never been to therapy. She shared that with me. And after that experience with her, it's definitely a deal breaker now. But before we even opened the office, when she told me about chairs that she had, showed me a picture and said, this is what it's going to be. And they were not at all what she said they were going to be. So I moved them out of the space, and she was not happy about that. So fast forward probably a year and a half later, similar things kind of happen. She does in fact have a problem with some of the choices that I wanted to make. But what ended up happening is that she would get really, she would have really strong reactions to things. And she started telling me that she didn't like, for example, those chairs. She said, I never said that. And she did. And I was incredibly confident that she had. So I went back through emails and found where she said yes and, or, said whatever, and showed her. And that didn't sit very well with her. Well, so this time goes on, and more things continue to happen. And even over a year into it, something would come up that was maybe from a year ago. And she would say, I never said that, or I did tell you this, or I never agreed to that, or something along that line. And I found myself spending so much time and energy going back through emails from literally before we even got our space together, finding the proof that she did in fact say what I said she said, or didn't say what I told her she didn't tell me, or to prove that I did say something that I said, that I had said, and she was telling me that I never said it. So it created a tremendous amount of stress for me. I was struggling a lot with questioning myself. And eventually I decided, okay, the impact that this is having on me seems far beyond just dealing with this woman that I don't really care what she thinks. But this is really affecting me. Like I said, I was anxious. I found myself not wanting to go into the office, and I loved my office. I create my space to be like a sanctuary for me and hopefully for my clients. I would meditate in my space. I loved going into my space, but I didn't want to go in there. I would go in right before I had clients. I would keep my door closed so I didn't have to interact with her. And I decided to seek out somebody again. So I knew obviously that there was something going on there. I just needed to understand what it was. And so I found somebody, and the interesting thing about it is that, again, she was somebody that had a lot of experience working with trauma. And so, because I always think no matter what we're going to therapy for, if you have an experience of trauma or a history of trauma, it's important to work with somebody that has that understanding. So an interesting thing about choosing her and continuing to work with her is that she is very different than the person I started with. Her demeanor, the way that she shows up in the space, very different than this first person. And had I started my journey with this person, it would have made a huge difference, probably in not a good way. Because while I think, obviously she was trained and licensed and all of that, while she had a lot of value as a therapist, because of how she showed up, I don't know that I would have felt much of a connection with her. I don't know how I would have really felt, but because I had done so much healing to that point, I didn't necessarily need that in particular. Now, I think it actually could have been even more beneficial if she had been like that, but she wasn't like that. So I'm just sharing that with you because at different stages in our journey, we may want or need different things, and that's okay. So with that person, there were things that I liked and valued in our work together, but there were some things that I didn't love. So, and it was with her. So this would have been 2013. So this was years after I started my own healing journey, like almost 20 years. During one of the sessions, I don't know exactly how it happened. I don't know if she'd said something. I don't know if as I was talking about something clicked and I connected the dots, because that does happen a lot. And it's probably happened for you if you've been in therapy. You might be talking about something or sharing something, and suddenly you have this recognition, right? So in this particular session, it suddenly clicked for me that this wasn't about this woman that I was sharing a space with. And I knew that, but it suddenly hit what it was really about. And it wasn't even about that she was causing me to question myself, or that I was feeling the need to go back and prove something. It was that because she kept telling me that things were not as I remembered them, which generally proved to be the reality based on written emails, because she was questioning that or trying to tell me it wasn't real, that it felt like my mom, when I was 8 years old, telling me it was a bad dream and to go back to sleep. After I told her that my stepfather was trying to kill me after he covered my mouth and nose and I couldn't breathe. She told me it was a bad dream and to go back to bed. And as I was walking back to bed, I was telling myself that it was my fault she didn't believe me because I was being too dramatic. And of course she wouldn't believe that. And I should have done it differently and all those things. But there was a part of that, because we doubt ourselves anyway. We doubt our own memories. We think that we make it bigger than it really is. And so when she said that, I internalized that at a deeper level. And so in the current situation in 2013, her saying that something was real that wasn't took me back, and it caused me to doubt my own memory. It caused me to doubt what I knew to be true. And fortunately, I had emails to go back to prove, where when I was 8, I didn't. I had no proof of any of the abuse that I experienced over the time that I did. But even after all the healing that I did, and I had talked about that experience before, but I never really connected it to a current situation of how it caused me to doubt my own knowing. I would not have been able to really do that in that way at a deep level and feel that truth, feel that reality, without having somebody that I could process with, that I could share experiences and she could repeat back to me or share with me her perspective about something. I couldn't have done that on my own. I might have been able to have some recognition of different things, but in that moment, it was literally like magnet coming together. It was something literally kind of clicked, and in that moment, it all made sense. It all made sense. So I don't remember how long exactly I worked with her. I probably worked with her again for, I don't know, maybe 6, 8, 9 months, I don't know. But I ended up stopping working with her because I left Arizona. And I probably wouldn't have worked with her much longer anyway. We had just started doing some equine. I think I only went to one session. But if I needed to go back and she was still practicing, I might go back to her. And there may come a time that I need to go back. And if I do, I will. I also have peer consultation. So I have support if like I'm feeling overwhelmed about work, or I'm struggling with a client in some way, or something like that, or how to help a client. Like, I have resources and support available to me. And that's an important part as a therapist that we have as well. It's very different than a support group, but kind of has some of the same benefit in a way. So I would absolutely go back to therapy if I'm struggling, and particularly if I'm struggling for a period of time and I just can't figure out what's going on. We all need somebody to help us on this journey. It doesn't matter how educated you are, how smart you are, how long you've been in therapy before, what your degree is in, how much support you have externally, because everybody's got their own stuff. And therapists are not perfect. I am not perfect. I am far, far from perfect. But therapists, particularly therapists that have specific training around childhood trauma, have very specific training. They have a depth of training. They have a depth of understanding. And hopefully they have a depth of experience to help. And I would not hesitate to reach out to somebody again if and when I need that. I have been very fortunate in the years since then that my life has been, I have felt very grounded and rooted and supported, and not had to deal with any office mates, which is also beneficial. Although I miss, not so much that she was a part of that, but I do miss having office mates, like having people to just connect with on a regular basis. So I hope that you found this helpful. I know all of our experiences are different, but I wanted to share this with you, first of all, to remind you that I have not done this on my own, and that even as a therapist, it's hard to find a therapist. That even as a therapist, it's hard to set boundaries. It's hard to honor what feels okay to you and what doesn't. So I'd love to hear your reactions to this, your experiences in working with somebody or finding somebody. Share in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Again, if you've not yet subscribed, make sure to do so and click the little bell for notifications. And if you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up so other people can find it too. Thanks so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next time.